That we do not anticipate the hurricane to make landfall around high tide, but still storm surges of about 10 to 15 feet possible in the southern portions of Massachusetts. Again, high tide around Plymouth, Massachusetts is 7:48 p.m., about 6 to 7 hours later than the anticipated landfall time.
And Jim, because of New England, this is a rare event, and people are apt to judge what they need to do by what they did in the past. A lot of people thought the Gloria sort of fizzled out before it got there, came in far to the west. We're particularly concerned about the people around Narragansett Bay because we think the eye is coming very near there. The hurricane's not going to diminish. The storm surge is going to be very high there. And I'm afraid some people will try to take action at the last minute, like to secure their boats for something like that. In the past, a lot of lives have been lost because people wait too late to do that. And bear in mind now, even though the wind isn't very high, it's going to come up very suddenly, so don't get caught someplace where you can't get out.
Again, about 2 to 3 hours away, John, and perhaps...
I don't think any more than that.
Yeah, it's definitely about the Hamptons.
And the people up there remember Hurricane Carol. This is probably more like Carol than any of the rest. It's as strong, I think, as the 1938 hurricane. It's coming in pretty near where Hurricane Carol came in 1954.
Thank you, John. As John said, again, a whole different animal than Hurricane Gloria, so what you got to do it quick. And get ready, because the worst is going to come, and it's going to come pretty fast. Stay with us here on the Weather Channel. We will continue to update you on.
Closer to the time of the arrival of the storm, there could be a storm surge. Interior sections, the best guess, up to 5 to possibly 10 inches of rain, a flood watch in effect, and tornado watch is also in effect. Sometimes a tornado will accompany the storm as it tracks up. So stay tuned. We'll have updates for you right on through the day. And this is no storm to fool around with. Follow the instructions, especially pertaining to evacuations. That's the latest on the storm. Here's Jim.
Okay, thank you, Bob. We might inform you that Lieutenant Governor Paul Cellucci, who is sitting in for Governor Weld, who is vacationing at this hour, has declared a state of emergency here in Massachusetts, and that obviously will allow him to make necessary orders and also to spend necessary money in order to deal with the emergency caused by Hurricane Bob. That also will greatly affect the Massachusetts Civil Defense Department, which will handle some of the activities in relationship to Hurricane Bob. We have with us on the phone now Doug Forbes of Mass Civil Defense. Doug, can you explain to us exactly what your activities will have to be now over the next couple of hours?
Okay, well, we're geared up here. We're the center of activity here during a storm. We've got representatives.
This one early last week, didn't you, Steve?
Yeah, Pam, on Friday we had a fairly good idea that there would be some problems with this storm system. By early Saturday we felt that it would definitely be moving our way, and it turned into a pretty good hurricane. You know, we talk about the categories 1, 2, and 3, and to give you a better idea of exactly what that means, it's called the Saffir-Simpson scale. We're going to take a look at that right now. Each category represents what the wind damage can do. A Category 1 is a minimal hurricane of 74 to 95 miles per hour. It may cause a storm surge of 4 to 5 feet. A Category 2 is a moderate hurricane of about 86 to 110. That can cause a storm surge of 6 to 8 feet. We are dealing with a Category 3. That's winds of 111 to 130. Extensive damage with a storm surge of 9 to 12 feet. So Category 3 on a scale of 1 to 5 is nothing to take lightly. Now, we do have the latest coordinates as of 10 o'clock this morning from the Hurricane Center in Miami, and here are the coordinates. It is now located at 39.6 north, 72.6 west. That's 165 miles southeast of Providence, Rhode Island, still packing winds of 115 miles per hour, and it is moving to the northeast at a little better than 30 miles per hour. So some quick calculations would tell me that the center of Bob will be making landfall very close to the coast of Rhode Island between 2 and 3 o'clock this afternoon. It'll be about 5 hours, give or take an hour. So we'll start to feel the effects of tropical storm winds within the next hour or two on Block Island. I would say by noontime, the south coast of Rhode Island will have winds in excess of 40 miles per hour. By 2 o'clock this afternoon, hurricane force winds should be felt along all of the south coast of Rhode Island and southeastern Mass. So it's moving right along. It is moving on the exact path that the Hurricane Center had forecasted earlier this morning, and that would put it almost a direct hit across Narragansett Bay. So we're talking storm surges later this afternoon between 2 and 4 o'clock of perhaps 5 to as much as 15 feet above a normal high tide. So Bob is moving right along.
Steve, we're also fortunate, though, that the tides are going to be high later in the afternoon.
That's true, Dave. Around 4 to 4:30, the high tides will begin here in Providence and Newport. The areas that may luck out are Cape Cod and the islands, where the high tide will be closer to 7 or 8 o'clock tonight. By then, Bob should be well north of our area, probably moving through the Boston area on into the Gulf of Maine. So between 2 and 4 o'clock, that is a very critical time for us because high tide will occur at about 4:15 in the afternoon in Newport. So a 2 to 4 o'clock time frame would put that storm surge during the height of high tide. So it's going to be very crucial.
All right, thank you so much, Steve. And you know, one of the areas of Rhode Island that always takes it on the brow is my hometown of Warwick. And Tom Bridie is live in Warwick right now to give us the latest on the situation there, where I understand, Tom, that everyone in low-lying areas has been ordered evacuated.
There has been an evacuation warning this morning, Pam, as you said, effective as of 11 o'clock this morning. All low-lying areas, specifically the Oakland Beach area, is to be evacuated. And unlike Massachusetts, where Paul Moniz has been covering the situation, of course, Rhode Island, the police and other civil defense authorities can force people to leave their homes. We are right at the tip of Oakland Beach here. You can look straight out there. All you see is grayness and black. But right down the end there, that's Narragansett Bay. All the way down, there is nothing to stop the force of the wind, and not coincidentally, that is right where the wind is coming from right now. Joining me right now is Warwick Mayor Charles Donovan, who has been making somewhat of a tour around the city this morning. What can you tell us from what you've seen, Mayor?
Well, we're prepared for the worst. This is not a good situation at all, and we expect it'll be very much as bad as it was a few years ago when we had the big storm. But this is not good. But we're prepared. We have several centers. We have the Pilgrim High School, the Veterans High School, and Tollgate High School for evacuation purposes. And we would urge everyone, if they can't get to higher land with relatives, to get over to those centers. And we've started, as you said, 11:30. We're having everyone emergency evacuation of these low-lying areas, Tom.
Okay, Mayor. Obviously, I'm sure you've been in touch with your own civil defense authorities. We've seen some police officers in the area. What kind of compliance are you getting with this order to evacuate?
Well, very good. But I would also like to tell people that the emergency number is 738-2000. If you have any need at all, call that number, and civil defense people, police and fire people, and emergency people are there to take care of those needs right now.
Okay. You're a lifelong resident of Rhode Island, if I am correct.
That's correct.
Can you tell me, is this the worst that you've ever seen?
Well, I remember Hurricane Carol very much, and they tell me this is going to be just as bad, so let's not take this for granted. This is a bad situation, Tom.
Okay. Mayor, good luck on your tour.
Okay.
Hope everything goes well. I know you'll be on the job. Thank you
good.
very much. That was Warwick Mayor Charles Donovan. Once again, we are at the tip of Oakland Beach. If a storm surge were to come, it is quite possible that it could occur here. We will remain on the scene here covering the situation until we are ourselves forced to evacuate by the Warwick Police. We'll have more as the situation develops. Reporting live from Oakland Beach in Warwick, I'm Tom Bridie. Pam, Dave?
Thank you, Tom. And we mentioned earlier, if you're just joining us now, it bears repeating that when Hurricane Gloria hit back in '85, a lot of people didn't take it too seriously, and it wasn't, in the scope of things, as powerful as other hurricanes that have hit the area. But in the very area where Tom is now, I happen to be very near that point, reporting from Connecticut in Warwick, Connecticut Beach area. And I can remember trying to cross the street to talk to a police officer, and I felt like Sister Bertrille. You know, I was just about lifted off my feet and flying by. I mean, I've never experienced anything like it in my life. It is just a really scary experience. And certainly, if you're not a reporter, you don't have to be out in it. I wouldn't advise doing that, because
Tom,
it's very dangerous.
You're still with us, aren't you, Tom?
Yes, I'm here, Dave.
All right, Tom. What are you seeing down there in the way of activity around you? Are there people leaving their homes there? Is there a lot of activity, or are people just being pretty quiet about it?
People have, I'm not sure I heard your question correctly. I believe you asked how people are handling the evacuation order. Everyone that we have spoken to has complied. They've made no argument. There's been no discussion. There have been a few people that we have heard about who said they are going to stay in this area. But I'm wondering if their minds are going to change. In the last 35 minutes that we've been out here, the wind has picked up considerably along with the rain. Amazingly enough, if you look out on the water out here, there were actually some yachts out, some of them putting into Greenwich Cove, which is known as a fairly good hurricane hole, good protection against the elements. But actually some jet skiers and some other power boats that apparently were the thrill seekers that we've often heard of that simply seem to be ignoring any warnings of the potential disaster that could occur in this area.
Tom, do you see much activity in the way of people lashing down the houses, taping up windows, that kind of thing when you travel through the area? Do you see some precautions being taken?
A lot of precautions have been taken. Actually, you can hear an emergency vehicle coming through issuing one last warning here. We're just down the street from if we can turn the camera, you can see that street. That's Cherry Stone's restaurant. That area is completely boarded up. We took some pictures of that a little earlier. We haven't had a chance to send them back to the station. Some other further inlying areas have also been boarded up, and a lot of people have been complying with any orders that the police or any other emergency vehicles have been giving. So yes, there has been some compliance. A lot of people concerned about just exactly what is coming here. They don't know our TV station, people in there watching the Weather Channel and watching Channel 6, listening to Channel 6 on the radio, and a few people about a half hour ago who came down here to just take a look out on the water to see what it was like. Curiosity seekers, I suppose.
Tom, that area where you are now, what happened there during Gloria? Has anybody mentioned what happened there? I'm not really sure about your particular vantage point there.
Dave, I'm sorry, you've got me at a loss on that one. I'm afraid that nobody's been able to discuss it, although some people have said that they were here for Gloria. They expect this to be worse.
Okay.
Yeah, it was bad when Gloria came. It's certainly in the way of tree limbs down, trees hitting onto house roofs, those kinds of things.
And they did a report. We were talking a few minutes ago off the air. They did a major report. I think it was required by the Public Utilities Commission back then because
shades indicate moderate rain. If you have a color television set, you see the gold areas. Those splotches are indicating some very heavy rains and perhaps some thunder and lightning as well. We find one area moving across northwest Rhode Island, another one across the south coast of Rhode Island, and another fairly good cell that looks like a severe thunderstorm that is moving inland across southeastern Connecticut. These are the areas we'll be watching closely. These are the areas that are potential for producing tornadoes as the hurricane gets closer, and certainly these areas are producing heavy squally rains and gusty winds and rain in excess of an inch or two in a very short amount of time. That's why a flash flood watch is in effect for all of southeastern New England. We have about a half an inch of rain so far here in Providence. Now, as we go to our satellite loop, you can see in the last couple of hours, Bob is continuing its progress toward us here in New England. It's lost a little bit of its intensity in about the last hour or two. The system itself has become a little more elongated, but it's still packing some powerful winds of about 115 miles per hour, 39.6 north, 72.6 west, about 165 miles south-southwest of Providence. And again, it's moving north-northeast, a little better than 30 miles per hour. So the timetable for the eye of the storm to move across Rhode Island would be about 2:30 to 3 o'clock this afternoon. Certainly, hurricane force winds will be felt before the eye moves inland, probably as early as noontime on Block Island, perhaps as early as 1 o'clock here in Providence. If that track continues, a storm surge of 8 to 16 feet is very likely in and around Narragansett Bay.
Steve, quick question.
10 to 130 mile per hour winds. It's a Category 3 on the lower side of the medium-sized hurricanes. Extensive storm damage can be expected, and the surge is 9 to 12 feet. We're most concerned about storm surge because the water is packed up, and it tends to rise with the arrival of the storm, and that will be from noon until about 2 p.m. on our south coast. And the most concern will be in Buzzards Bay and down through Narragansett Bay as we're looking at live radar pictures of Bob. The rain bands coming in across New England, moderate to heavy rain falling on the south coast, and you can barely see the eye curling up the lower left-hand portion of your screen. It's roughly 160, 150 miles south-southwest of Providence, Rhode Island. We have the position for you here, and that position is at 39.6 north, 72.6 west. Again, a little over 150 miles south-southwest Providence. Top winds 115 miles per hour, moving to the north-northeast at 35 miles per hour. We have temperatures in the 70s over Cape Cod, winds out of the southeast at 30 miles per hour at Nantucket. 20 to 30 mile per hour winds out of the east at Block Island, out of the northeast at Islip, and out of the north at New York City at 25 miles per hour. We're watching pressures falling rapidly down there, and we're very concerned, especially from eastern Long Island on through Buzzards Bay. That seems to be the target area that we're trying to narrow down for you. Right now, we're projecting right up through Buzzard or Narragansett Bay across the Boston area between noon and 4 p.m. We are getting some indications it's trying to curve a little more to the west, a little more to the left. If that's the case, it won't be quite as bad out on outer Cape Cod. Nevertheless, it's too early to really say that for sure. So it does look a southeastern New England track on this hurricane is quite likely, be it Montauk on Long Island or be it up through Buzzards Bay. It's going to be coming nearby, and we are again concerned. Let's take a look at our forecast.
Adams is at the stock market drone.
And we want to mention again that we're staying here with our continuing coverage to keep you abreast of everything that's happening as that information becomes available to us. So many odds and ends that we have to mention, too. The bridges will be closing in less than an hour from now in our area. Most of the major bridges.
Actually, in a half hour.
In a half hour,
yeah,
right, from now.
Let's go through them again, since we have people joining us at various times and maybe perhaps dropping out. In Rhode Island, the Jamestown Bridge, the Newport Bridge, and the Mount Hope Bridge, they will all be closed within less than a half an hour. At 11 o'clock, they're going to be closed because of the anticipated high winds. It will probably be in the vicinity of 40 miles an hour or better. And then at 11:30, the Braga Bridge is going to be closed, going over into Fall River from the Somerset Swansea area, so that will be closed. The Brightman Street Bridge, for the time being, will remain open, probably because that's a much lower bridge and is not as susceptible to the higher winds.
But certainly that's all subject to change at any moment, and that's why we urge you to stay tuned. We also have understood that the Cape Cod bridges are still open, and you can only imagine with so many people vacationing there this time of year, they probably wanted to let as many people get off Cape as possible if they could. They certainly have shelters set up there as well, from what we understand, at schools and senior centers in that area. And
transit, we probably should mention that too.
That's right. Public transit not running in Rhode Island. As of noontime, so it's just about the last chance you have to use the buses in the area. In Fall River, we understand the buses are still running, but we don't know. That's until further notice, so we're not sure how long that's going to last. But certainly this is not a time to be out on anything frivolous. And, you know, Tom Brady had mentioned earlier, we checked in with him live in Warwick. He said some curiosity seekers were wandering down, looking at the waterfront, and it is very tempting to do that. It is a somewhat... I imagine such a terrific sight to see a storm like this, but I don't think it's worth putting yourself in that kind of danger just to say that you saw Hurricane Bob coming through.
Not only that, but it tends to occupy police with things that they really shouldn't have to be preoccupied with when you're trying to, again, we mentioned earlier in the broadcast that a lot of these police departments in the shore communities are not very large.
That's right, they're small.
And so if they're running around trying to shoo away people who are down there just to get a look, you know, they're trying to save the people's lives who are gawking, and they're also trying to save the lives of the people who they're trying to evacuate.
Right.
And some of those people need a little bit of convincing to leave. So if you're down there frankly just getting in the way, you're doing a lot of people a disservice.
That's right, and they're trying to help out people who might be in a crisis situation as well. And as we have been doing throughout the morning hours, we have reporters from Channel 6 posted around the state and the southeastern Massachusetts area, keeping you on top of what's happening perhaps where you live. Right now, we're going to check in with Barbara Marr, who's been in Providence around the hurricane barrier area, and that's where we find her right now. Barbara, what can you tell us?
Hi, Pam. Well, first I have to tell you is the weather is getting much nastier. It is raining much harder, and the winds are gustier. You know, you can really feel that this storm is picking up. And it's actually a little colder, I've noticed. Earlier it was muggy and humid and hot. It's not so anymore, at least that's what I think. It may also be because I'm soaking wet and beginning to get a little chill. We went over to the inside of the hurricane barrier just a little while ago, inside the red brick part of the building that you can see right now, where there is an amazing amount of machinery. 5 huge pumps that are ready to go. The gates are closed, but the pumps aren't working yet. They are in sort of a standby mode. They have gotten their electricity from next door, Narragansett Electric. It's an underground cable, and they're ready to go when the time is right. Now, those pumps help to transfer the water from inside to outside, and vice versa if necessary, I guess, which is an additional thing this hurricane barrier does besides providing a physical barrier to the storm surge, which right now I guess you would have to say we're expecting. At least we're preparing for that. When that happens, now when the pumps start going depends upon a couple of factors. Joe Campo, who is running the operation, tells me. One of them is when the hurricane gets to a certain parallel, a certain place on the map. That, along with the height of the tide, and he's just waiting for that time to come. It hasn't come yet. Now, in terms of whether or not the hurricane barrier can protect the city of Providence as it's supposed to, Joe was saying that based on what the predictions are now for the storm surge and the height of that, and what he knows about the height of the hurricane barrier, it sounds like we're going to be fine. So it's a wait and see kind of thing, because this hurricane barrier, as we've been saying all morning, hasn't been tested. It's here because of the terrible hurricane damage and deaths that we had from hurricanes in 38 and 54, but since then we haven't had a hurricane that bad. So as it stands right now, they're just waiting over there, and the gates are down, but the pumps aren't working, but the pumps will be the extra thing that they do once things get worse.
Barbara, is
along Rodney French Boulevard in New Bedford, and she said part of her front screen got ripped out with the gusts, and they are evacuating part of Rodney French Boulevard, the east and west part, 20 feet from the water. Police cruisers going by with loudspeakers asking people to leave and asking them to go to one of 2 shelters in New Bedford. The situation is pretty much the same in various other parts of southeastern Mass. People being asked to leave also in Fairhaven, on Wilbur's Point, West Island, and the western part of Sconnecut Neck. Now, we just understand a couple of minutes ago that they are closing or have closed the causeway, which connects part of the island, and they are shutting off all low-lying water mains at about 12:30. So that means if you live on West Island, you won't have any water or won't be able to use your toilet facilities after 12:30. So just a sort of an added incentive to get out of there if you are still there to evacuate. Also in Mattapoisett, they're asking people in the low-lying beach areas there to evacuate. And in Fall River along Atlantic Avenue and parts of the Landing condominiums, they're asking people to leave as well. Now, we want to mention that here in this area there's an additional shelter we need to tell you about that is not on the list, and that is in Freetown. It is the Freetown Elementary School, and one of the selectmen just called a few minutes ago to tell us that that is open. On a travel note, there was a travel ban in Fall River. They are basically telling people if it's not an emergency and if you're not in an emergency vehicle, you will be stopped. And that started at 10 o'clock this morning, and they're only allowing travel again in emergency situations. And there are one of 3 shelters in Fall River that you can go to: Durfee High School, Talbot Middle School, and the Delisle School. Also, the Braga Bridge will be closing at 11:30 this morning, and the Brightman Street Bridge will remain open. Now, we told you earlier that the hurricane dike in New Bedford was supposed to be closing at 10 o'clock this morning, and I was just talking to one of the photographers who's out there shooting for us, and he called back to say that as of right now, it has not been closed. They're apparently still waiting for a few more boats to come in so that they can secure them. And that's pretty much how it shapes up from here in terms of on the Cape. The shelters are still operating, and the bridges right now are still open there.
All right, Paul, and of course you were talking about transportation. We have an update in that regard here in the Rhode Island area. All roads are being closed as of 1 o'clock, no matter where you live. It's a travel ban. The only people that are allowed to get through are emergency vehicles or someone who has a special pass. So you'll be stopped, as Paul had mentioned there. And then another update is that all the bridges in Rhode Island, the Newport Bridge, Jamestown Bridge, and Mount Hope, were scheduled to close in just about 15 minutes from now at 11 o'clock, but they have postponed that until noon so that everyone who has to get through can get through, because then as of 1 o'clock, all of the roads are
evacuate. Remember, you only have till 11 o'clock to get off the island, and time is certainly running out. The state police are standing guard, and we're going to head right over into downtown Newport at this point and check out things there. Back to you, Pat and Karen.
Okay, Tom, we're told a late report here is that the bridges will remain open till noon, and I imagine that is because some people still are not yet off the island who wish to do so. So perhaps there is a little more time for them. Meantime, you saw the boat owners there. Did you sense an urgency among people who use boats for their livelihood, which in fact is a fair number of people in the Newport area?
Yes, we did sense an urgency. They're really trying to get their boats out of the water. Obviously, they make their livings at this, and they want to make sure that their livings are protected. Some of these people have been fishing these waters for many, many years. And remember the hurricanes back in 38 and 54, and just a lot of unpleasant memories still very much alive in their families. They often talk of those stories, and today it seems as though those stories could once again become a reality for those families. So certainly a great sense of urgency here, Pat.
Now, Tom, did you travel over the Jamestown Bridge to get there, or did you go through Fall River?
We went over the Jamestown Bridge, Pat, and there was a lot of traffic coming out of the area, as you can imagine. People are scurrying about, really trying to get out before any damage, if any, is done here.
And Tom, there are those of us who might say that a trip over the Jamestown Bridge is not pleasant in a regular storm. How was it for you going over with these winds kicking up as they are?
Extremely windy heading over. Looking down over the water, you could see the waves kicking up, and the situation out here is not friendly in terms of weather. Driving over the bridge, you could actually feel the bridge swaying a bit, and of course the winds have not really picked up yet to their maximum capacity that we're expecting a little bit later on. So I would not want to be on the bridge 1 hour from now. I know they've extended it to 12 noon, as you mentioned, but please, any people living on Aquidneck Island who have to get off, do so now, because you do not want to be on this bridge in the next few hours.
Okay, thank you. Tom again reporting live from Newport. We hope Tom comes back to us via Fall River. And now we're going to rejoin...
move themselves from close to the seashore when the winds reach over 100 miles an hour, which is expected to happen between 1 and 2 o'clock this afternoon. Do you have faith that they'll take care of themselves?
Tim, you know where your brothers are. I might also tell you, though, Tim, that the police have announced that they will close the parking lots at Nauset and at the seashore so that the onlookers and the sightseers might just as well not go down.
That's probably a wise idea, because some of us are such thrill seekers and weather buffs that we can't resist the opportunity. But also, in my lifetime and Kevin and Ed's lifetime, we've never seen anything like this, so it might not be the smartest way to learn by going down there and getting swept away. And I think that's a good thing that the police are doing, removing everybody. And you're all safe. Hopefully someone's going to come home and keep you company a little bit later.
I hope so. But I'll be watching you.
I'll be jumping into the living room every time to time, so if you just keep on Channel 6, hopefully the power won't go out for too long, and we'll keep in touch with you. Thank you very much, Mom. We have to go now.
Okay. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Hey, Tim, I think there's a future for your mother in meteorology or maybe reporting.
It had to come from somewhere, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Mom and Dad. Dad's the weather watcher. Mom is the public communicator.
Okay. Mom's the weather talker. We thank you, Caroline Kelly, for filling us in on what's happening out on the Cape. You never
Crisscross shaping, I always look better. The Cross Your Heart bra. Great looks start with Cross Your Heart from Playtex.
The fit that makes the fashion.
You know it makes me wanna...
Shell Stick lets you pre-treat tough stains.
The gun, if you will, in the eye of the storm on the south side of your screen here, coming into the picture and just kind of following this tube right up toward the southeastern coast of New England. So this is a very dangerous situation. Bob right now is packing winds of 115 miles an hour, and we're talking about a whole different situation than we did with Hurricane Gloria. So the folks in New England, again, preparing as we speak, and the heavy rains have already come in, and they're just deluging everybody here. We've got rain, very heavy rain from Portland to Portsmouth. Line of thunderstorms heading toward the north shore of Boston right now, back to Worcester County, into the Connecticut Valley. Look at the rain here down in New Haven and across much of Long Island right now, and back in through New Jersey, where they're starting to taper off just a little bit at Atlantic City. You can just start to see the eye disappear a little bit, but it is very, very close. Less than 100 miles south right now of Islip, Long Island. Let's turn to John Hope. He's going to give us a little better perspective on the east and western side of the storm. A big difference depending on where you are.
Well, the eastern side is going to be a lot worse, Jim. The winds are going to be higher. They could be a good 15 or 20 miles an hour higher, sometimes even more than that. That's where the high storm surge is going to be. There's going to be more damage there than on the other side. But as we've been noticing, even on the west side, very, very heavy rain. Some of this rain is going to be enough to cause some inland flooding, and that's even on the west side. Also, we don't want to forget Long Island Sound, because the water is being propelled westward there, and that will tend to pile up in the western end of the sound. But in the bays, that's what we're worried about. Narragansett Bay, Buzzards Bay, the water is going to pile up at the heads of those bays.
And the way they kind of are oriented, they're almost like a little inverted V. It's going to funnel right up into the bay.
They will. That's exactly what happens.
So some problems in the bays. Thank you, John. We've got Bob Skilly on the phone. He is from the Blue Hill Weather Observatory in Boston, Massachusetts, which is about 10 miles to the south-southwest of the metro area. They're at about 600-plus feet up, and they recorded the highest sustained wind speed during the 1938 hurricane. And I guess the first question I have for Bob is, Bob, what was the wind gust that you recorded back then?
186 miles an hour. This is actually a calculated gust. The average 5-minute velocity was 121 miles per hour. And the anemometer we didn't have a meter that showed 186, but it was calculated from the 121 mile an hour 5-minute average.
Bob, let's just say we're looking down the gun at this storm. Of course, it will be affecting Boston in some way. Let's find out what your weather's like right now up there.
Right now, we're in the low clouds atop the hill. The cloud base is just down over the 600-foot summit. And we're looking at some light rain with occasional heavy rain showers. We've measured almost an inch of rain, 0.98 here, since midnight. And we've had a few thunderstorms earlier between 7 and 8 this morning. But at the present time, it's just quite light rain, and the wind speed is about 20 to 25 miles per hour, gusting to 37 from the east-northeast. The peak wind gust so far today has been 41 from the east-northeast. Now, that was about an hour ago, so we seem to be in sort of a lull here right now.
What kind of wind have you had so far with this thing? I mean, how high have you gusted?
41 miles per hour.
About 41 miles an hour. What are you expecting?
Well, historically, if the storm should stay to our west, and it looks like it's going to be very close,
right.
We historically have had always a wind gust of over 100 miles per hour up here, such as in Carroll in 54. I believe the gust was about 135. Donner in 1960 was 140 miles per hour. And, of course, the 38 hurricane, even though that went way into Connecticut, down the Connecticut Valley,
right.
The pressure gradient was enough to give us 186.
Well, Bob, what's the mood like right now with everyone up there?
Well, everybody's sort of, we have a number of people here with the Weather Club, Louisville Observatory Weather Club, standing around, and we're just waiting for things to start happening. Pressure is falling about 0.12 of an inch an hour now, so that's the fastest pressure fall we've seen. But the winds haven't quite responded yet, I would say. But
Thank
we're
you,
just
Bob.
waiting for it to start.
Thank you, Bob Skilly. We appreciate that from the Blue Hill Weather Observatory in Boston, Massachusetts. Thank you, John Hope. We will continue to update you on Bob. We're talking about 2 hours or even less, some less than 100 miles away from New York City right now. So some problems as this heads north toward the south coast of Rhode Island. We'll keep you updated. Let's go back to the studios now. Vivian's got the latest statistics on Bob.
Thanks, James. And the latest statistics show the center of the storm is located about 115 miles southwest of Providence, Rhode Island. If you're plotting 40.2 degrees north, 72.2 degrees west, and as Jim mentioned, still packing winds of 115 miles per hour, and it continues to move to the north-northeast at 30 miles per hour. The National Hurricane Center suggests that if this hurricane continues this same trajectory, the highest strike probability is on the eastern portions of Long Island all the way to the lower coast of Maine. Now, we do still have those hurricane warnings in effect along the coast of Maine and Massachusetts all the way to New Jersey, and the strong storm surge forecast some 10 to 15 feet above normal tide. Now, great news that the hurricane will not make landfall around the same time that high tide is forecast, and it's forecast about 7:43 around Cortland, Maine later this evening, and about 7:43 in Boston. So some 6 to 7 hours later is when we anticipate the high astronomical tide. So great news that the storm system or the actual hurricane will not make landfall at the same time that high tide occurs, because that will mean very, very devastating conditions. We already have the devastating conditions in the forecast with the hurricane itself during low tide, with the winds of 115 miles per hour right along the eye, well, near the eye, but hurricane force winds extend some 100 miles east of the eye. So very gusty conditions and heavy rain associated too. We'll show you regional radar of the area with heavier feeder bands along the eastern portions of New Jersey, southeast New York, with flash flood warnings in effect for Bronx County, as well as Kings County, even Queens County in New York, and even New York County and Richmond County, also Rockland counties under flash flood warning this morning. So please bear this in mind as an additional 3, 4, and 5 inches of rain in the forecast for the New York City metropolitan area. Now, landfalling hurricanes do produce tornadoes. A tornado watch remains in effect until 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time for the states shaded in red. Here's the big picture as we pan out and show you the rest of the nation. And we've seen a few thunderstorms rumbling along the backside of this trough of low pressure. Now, thunderstorms have moved through the eastern portions of Indiana, well, actually southeast Indiana, moving into Covington, Kentucky. Now, Dearborn under a severe thunderstorm warning, that's right here, the county, and Claremont and Hamilton County near Cincinnati, Ohio, under a severe thunderstorm warning as they continue to race off to the east at about 30 miles per hour. More thunderstorms crossing North Ohio. Therefore, a severe thunderstorm watch remains in effect for this area until 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Let's check the forecast for the rest of your work week. This look ahead is sponsored by True Value. Got a tough job to do? You can do it with True Value Hardware Stores. Afternoon highs tomorrow and Wednesday. Still kind of cool, abnormally so, over the northeast with 70s, 80s encompassing a good part of the Ohio and Tennessee valleys, but 90s remain pretty much entrenched in the nation's midsection. They'll be widespread and also hot throughout the interior regions out west, right on through Friday afternoon, as well as Saturday. Well, things will begin to clear come later tomorrow evening and certainly by Wednesday as the frontal system moves through, and also we'll get rid of that storm system, the hurricane. More scattered showers, though, as another little weak system crosses over the Great Lakes region, scattering showers and thunderstorms here, and it moves quickly to the east Friday with more scattered showers and thunderstorms over parts of the northeast Saturday. That's a look ahead. Stay with us. We'll check the traveling conditions next.
Can do it with True Value. Master Electrician products give you the power to light things up, to turn things off, to beautify things, and to help make things safer. You can do all this and more with Master Electrician products from these True Value hardware stores and home centers.
Visit your local True Value store, your store of first choice.
Take a minute to get the accurate weather situation in Europe. The international weather, 41 minutes past the hour, between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern, only on the Weather Channel. Now, your local forecast, accurate and dependable from the Weather Channel. Coming up, a look at your local radar. But first, the current local conditions. Special regional information. The regional forecast. Your local 36-hour forecast. The extended forecast. The current radar showing any precipitation in your area. Intensity is indicated by the color code at the top of the screen.
Want to trade? What you got? Give me the orange juice, I'll give you my sandwich. I got a sandwich. Give me the orange juice for my donut. Half deodorant. Deal.
There's nothing like 100% pure Florida quality orange juice with the vitamins, minerals, and taste that make you feel so good.
Hey, you drank more than half. I had to. My half was at the bottom.
100% pure Florida quality orange juice that makes you feel so good.
You don't have to worry when rain keeps pouring down, because your home can take it, whatever comes around.
Olympic Oil Stain has pure linseed oil.
After the storm passed here, but as we get up toward eastern Maine, and may hit as the tide is almost at high tide. More updates coming up in just a couple of minutes, and we'll look at the latest satellite picture.
Your local forecast, accurate and dependable from the Weather Channel. Coming up, a look at your local radar. But first, the 36-hour forecast.
the latest on Bob from the National Hurricane Center, call the Weather Channel Connection, 95 cents a minute, 1-900-288-8800.
For those of you who have been reluctant to wear a hearing aid, Miracle Ear has more great news. If you have trouble hearing in noisy situations, the exciting Miracle Ear Clarifier may be your answer. The Clarifier features a special filter that automatically reduces background noise.
In a restaurant situation, it picks up the noises I want to hear, but the other noises are just moved off into the background.
If you or someone you know thinks they may be suffering from hearing loss, call Miracle
15 feet above normal.
Okay, on the map here we have Long Island. The eastern tip is right here. Here's the eye wall of the hurricane with the wind circulating like this, which means it pushes the water ashore here in Rhode Island and the eastern part of Connecticut, right on through the Cape Cod area, Nantucket area, right on up into the Boston area where the stronger winds are going to be. And that condition with heavy rains, possibility of an isolated tornado or two, are going to spread right on up into Maine by this afternoon.
2 points, Bob, and check me as we go along here. One is that as great a danger as the wind is, and it is a danger, the basic danger, the most important danger is rising water.
That's correct. The storm surge on the coast and then the flash floods inland. That's where we lose most of our people.
And what a lot of people don't understand is in the wake of these hurricanes, frequently tornadoes are spawned off on the edges.
Exactly right. Some isolated tornadoes or two that'll be in those areas. And, of course, all those big trees, you get into places like Boston with large buildings. Then you get strong winds there, glass flies, comes out of those buildings and so on.
You mentioned Hurricane Carol in 1954, which came along about August 30th, 1954. That killed 68 people in the northeast United States. You see that as the closest thing to this current hurricane.
That's the potential, and yes, we're talking about a storm very similar to that, and I'm a little concerned, Dan, because we're getting calls from people up there who say because of the Soviet Union situation, they're not aware of just how severe this storm is, and so we appreciate what you're doing.
Well, that's a very good point, Bob. That obviously the Soviet Union story is a magna, I can't find the word. It's an
Right.
absolutely overwhelming international story, but for people in the path of this hurricane, Bob Sheets, you've seen many of these go. What is your basic concern, that people will take it for granted, not understand how big and how powerful it is?
Yes, I think that's it. And what happens if you get that continuous coverage and they understand what happens with that storm surge, they see those reports, and then they realize you've got a severe hurricane out there. Hugo, they knew it because of what happened down in the Caribbean. The people in Charleston did the right thing. And we haven't had that here. The event is taking place where the people are, and I'm concerned that they're not taking it seriously enough.
All right, Bob Sheets, I'm at home. I live in a somewhat coastal area of Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. I'm a mother at home with 2 kids. What should I do? What can I do?
Right now, just stay inside because it's almost too late to take any other action. If you're in an area that has potential flash floods, then you need to move, because that's the kind of problem you can have. You start to get a little bit of a hills there, you get up there in New England, and so you get those potential flash floods. So you need to be taking those kind of actions. Otherwise, stay inside. Don't be out there with your cars up and down the roads and all the problems that are going to occur out there, electric lines down, all those kind of things.
And perhaps we can't emphasize enough, Bob, worry about the rising water, flash floods, immense tides, sea surge, all of those are real and present danger.
Exactly right. We're on the immediate coast in particular where you get that storm surge coming in, and some people go out there, you know how the surfers are, they will get out there and look for that, and other people just got to go down and see the excitement of that, and I'm saying don't do that. Stay home and let the storm pass. By this afternoon, it ought to be clearing up fairly nicely.
Bob Sheets, thank you very much. Bob Sheets live from the Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. We'll have him on at intervals
miles per hour. Now, take in mind that on the east side of the storm, you're going to have to add the forward speed, which is 35 miles per hour, add that to the wind, and you potentially have wind gusts in excess of 150 miles per hour, causing very, very major damage. Hopefully, all preparations have been made. You have your boat tied up, or you have all the other things tied down that will not be blown around, because they're going to be like flying missiles, believe me, when this storm hits shore. Okay, we have a few other things to talk about. The strike probability in about the same place again. It looks like right now it'll be coming onshore somewhere over Rhode Island, perhaps just to the west of Providence, and right over Norwood, Massachusetts, and up the Maine coast. And anything east of that is going to be really in for big trouble. To the west side of the storm, it'll be much weaker. They're going to get some strong winds, very heavy flooding rains, but at least the winds will not be approaching hurricane force except right around the eye wall itself. Okay, what else do we have? We have the storm surge. Could be as high as 10 to 15 feet. In the bays, of course, we have that funneling effect in Narragansett and Buzzards Bay coming up into a narrow ridge here. Otherwise, about 4 to 7 feet, could be as high as 17 feet in some of the bays. But fortunately, some of that's coming at times of low tide, so it's not looking too bad. It's bad enough, I'm not saying it could be a lot worse. The hurricane force winds, of course, will be onshore very, very shortly. We do have that noticed here over eastern Long Island and Connecticut. Certainly tropical storm force winds are onshore right now, especially over the shoreline of Connecticut, and rains locally 4 to 8 inches of rain, and of course could have been a lot worse if we had a lot slower storm. Times of high tide, fortunately the storm will be passing here at times of high tide, so at least that'll be one saving factor. We'll be back with the Michelin
Noon edition.
There are two developing stories. Hurricane Bob, packing winds of more than 100 miles an hour, is on a collision course with southern New England at this hour. Both Massachusetts and Rhode Island have declared states of emergency on that. Now, we have reporters around the region standing by, but right now we're going to go to meteorologist Bruce Schwegler, who's in the weather office with the latest on when this hurricane will hit. Bruce, what can you tell us?
I can tell you that the worst is going to be from right now through about 4 p.m., Liz. It's going to track right over the Boston area. We seem to have the track right on the money, right down the line, coming our way. It means that we're going to have strong southeasterly winds developing this afternoon. They'll then go into the south and southwest, let up somewhat later on this afternoon, then start picking up from the northwest. It means flooding rains. It means a tornado watch. It means flood warnings. It means that we're going to have a hurricane warning continuing in effect right on through the afternoon hours as it travels off to the northeast. You can see on regional radars the inverted U, that's the northern eye wall of the system, coming right up in the vicinity of Block Island on through Montauk, headed on a north-northeasterly track at about 35 miles per hour. Bands of blue, moderate to heavy rainfall are ensuing as we're looking at this storm system that's going to track right up over eastern Rhode Island, across the Boston area, and on into Maine. The worst effects will be on the south coast of New England. It'll tend to lose some strength as it crosses through us. Nevertheless, we're going to have very high winds. What we're most concerned about is hurricane surge or storm surge. And this storm surge is going to cause tides to run on the order of 10 to as much as 15 feet above normal, in particular in the vicinity of Buzzards Bay and also perhaps Narragansett Bay. The high tides are coming up at about 4 to 5 p.m. down in those areas, but we are seeing the waters being packed into the coastal locales, and therefore we're going to be facing the most critical situation here for the next few hours, already starting down there. The winds are out of the east and southeast along our south coast at gusts to 50 miles per hour. Here they're at around 30 miles per hour. We're going to have a lot more weather information for you a little later on. In the meantime, we'll go back for more news from Liz.
Okay, Bruce, we'll be checking back with you, of course, as the situation allows. The next few hours are going to be very important with this storm approaching the New England coastline, and there are potential trouble spots all over. One of the potential trouble spots, of course, is the South Shore, as Bruce has mentioned just a little earlier. Charlie Austin is standing by live in Scituate with the latest on the situation there. Charles?
Well, all morning long, ladies, people have been coming down here to Scituate Harbor to pull their boats out of the water if they can, if not, secure them safely.
Only 85 miles now to the south-southwest of Providence. Those are the coordinates, 40.6, 72.0. Top wind still estimated 115 miles an hour with higher gusts, so this is a dangerous storm heading north-northeastward. And we'll be back later in the program with a complete update on how that storm may affect you if you're in eastern New England. That's it for now. Back to Jim.
Thank you, Bob. Well, when Hurricane Bob arrives in the greater Boston area, sections of Cape Cod and the islands off the Cape are perhaps the most vulnerable. We have a series of reports now on how people in those areas are preparing. We start with News Center 5 Steve Frazier and Maria Rodriguez in Falmouth. Steve, Maria?
Well, Jim, this is one of the evacuation centers that have been set up in Falmouth. There are 3 of them. We're at the Falmouth High School right now. It is similar to evacuation centers that have been set up and down the coastline here on the Cape. And we understand from a number of reports that those evacuation centers have filled up very, very quickly. Now, they are trying to make sure that everybody remains safe here. A state of emergency has been declared in a number of communities here on the Cape. And also, we understand driving bans are going into effect at this hour to keep people off the roads. The Coast Guard is also taking precautions to take care of its aircraft. All of its aircraft based on Cape Cod have been sent westward and are now at Chicopee. At 7 o'clock this morning, conditions on the Cape were calm. It was overcast, literally the calm before the storm. By 8 o'clock, the winds began to pick up some.
Response so far has been
full, but I'm used to it.
Ernest,
much more. These effective techniques can be applied to every subject area.
The tropical storm winds are already on shore. Some hurricane-force winds are just grazing the coast. That is the center of the storm. 4 to 6 inches of rain from New Jersey all the way north into parts of Maine. The high tides, so you can see when this system moves on in, that there will be in the vicinity of high tides anywhere from 418 to Newport, Rhode Island, on up to 721 at Bar Harbor in Maine, and a tornado watch in effect for the southern New England coast. That's always the case with a landfalling hurricane, the possibility of tornadoes. Currently, in addition to the hurricane, we have a frontal band, a very vigorous one with a low, working its way across the Ohio River Valley with a severe thunderstorm watch in effect till 6 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. Let's take a look now at the forecast, and these positions are presented to us by the National Hurricane Center in Miami. As we move into late afternoon, the storm gets on up in toward Maine. The front bows its way across the southeastern U.S., rain along it, rain across the northeast continuing. The rest of the country, for the most part, under the influence of high pressure, with a little trough line in the middle bringing a few showers in the middle of the country. Late afternoon tomorrow finds that low working its way across New York State with more rain on the heels of what we've already seen. More to come in a moment.
If your idea of savings is to put your money in a bank, wake up to the 1990s and the Dreyfus 100% U.S. Treasury Money Market Fund. The one and only 100% invested in U.S. Treasuries. Treasuries, the safest investment of all. Now, consider income. If you pay state and local taxes on your bank income, you don't with Dreyfus 100% U.S. Treasury. This unique fund delivered income higher, considerably higher than bank money market accounts, even higher in a state with income tax. Call 1-800-843-8169. For today's yield, a prospectus. Checking? Oh, free checking. This is Dreyfus. Save a better way with Uncle Sam and the only Treasury Money Fund free of state and local tax in 49 states. Sorry, Tennessee. Call 1-800-843-8169 and say it's Dreyfus U.S. for us.
Now, your local forecast, accurate and dependable from the Weather Channel. Coming up, a look at your local radar. But first, the current local conditions. Special regional information.
It's an extensive list of shelters in your neighborhood.
Now, New England prepares for the worst as Hurricane Bob is headed our way.
And Hurricane Bob, of course, is due to hit land, as we've been mentioning, sometime early this afternoon, packing 100-mile-an-hour winds. Let's go to Steve Caccione in the Weather Center right now for the latest. Steve?
Okay, John, Hurricane Bob, if you haven't been listening or haven't been around for the last several hours, this is a dangerous hurricane. It is a Category 3. It's packing winds of 115 miles per hour, and it is still moving on a direct path that would take it right across Rhode Island within the next 2 or 3 hours. As we take a look at our satellite loop, you can see how that storm system continues to move along at a good clip. As a matter of fact, it's moving at speeds in excess of 35 miles per hour now. Here are the latest coordinates as of noontime: 40.6 north, 72 west, or about 80 to 85 miles southwest of Providence, Rhode Island. The central pressure of 959 millibars. It's peaked as far as intensity goes. It won't get any stronger, but it probably won't get any weaker either, and that's the key to the forecast. If it comes in during times of high tide, we're talking a storm surge of anywhere from 10 to 15 feet, and this would affect primarily Narragansett Bay and Buzzards Bay later on this afternoon between 3 and 4 o'clock. We're expecting landfall between 2 and 3 o'clock. Already near hurricane force winds are being experienced on Block Island at this very moment.
Really, Steve, does that surprise you that this early in the day they're already experiencing those near hurricane force winds, or is that what you expected?
It's just about right on track. It's a little after 12 o'clock noon, John, and we did expect between 2 and 3 o'clock for the storm system to make landfall. Now, that doesn't mean that the hurricane force winds come when the storm system makes landfall. These winds can extend as far as 100 miles to the north and to the west of the storm center itself, the eye of the storm. And there's a very good chance once that system comes inland, don't be fooled if you see the sun come out, and of all things, the winds go dead calm, because once the eye of the storm goes by, the winds will pick up from the northwest at the same hurricane force speed. So we're going to keep a very close watch on Bob, but within the next 2 or 3 hours, there will be a dramatic change in the weather outside your area.
All right, well, needless to say, we will check with you again throughout the day, Steve, and your colleague Tim Kelly for the latest on the track of Hurricane Bob.
Now, if you live in a low-lying area, you're being urged to seek shelter at higher ground further inland. If you don't know where to go, here is a comprehensive list now of the area shelters. In South Kingstown, there's the URI Keeney Gym. Also in Westerly, the Westerly High School, and in Charlestown, there's the Charlestown Elementary School. In Warwick, Tollgate High School, Pilgrim High School, Warwick Vets High School, and the Cranston Senior Center is also open for you. Elsewhere, in Newport, there's Rogers High School, Thompson Junior High, the Sheffield School, the Sullivan School, and the Underwood School. Moving along now to the Portsmouth.
Here's your 5-day business planner and a reminder that tropical storm and hurricane forecast positions are provided by the National Hurricane Center in Miami. Late afternoon this afternoon finds Hurricane Bob continuing to work its way across New England and on toward the coastal areas of Maine. Now, it's going to be moving very rapidly. Right now, it's moving at 35 miles an hour. Winds are 115 miles an hour, and it's got a lot of land across before it gets in that position. It looks like it'll be coming in very near or maybe slightly to the east of Narragansett Bay. Back to the west of it, low pressure in control of the Ohio Valley with a cold front swinging into the southeast and rain, and the possibility for some severe thunderstorms in this vicinity of Ohio and Indiana as that low traverses through that area. Back to the west, not one, not two, but three great big highs, count them, and they're going to be assuring generally fine weather for that part of the nation. Late afternoon tomorrow finds the Hurricane Bob will be gone, zipping on up through the Canadian Maritimes. This low that's back in the Midwest now will be moving into Pennsylvania with more rain for them. Rain along the front down in South Georgia, Florida, and along the Gulf Coast. Temperatures behind the front will be...
And a good day to you. Jim Cantura here in the Weather Channel Forecast Center. We continue to update you on Hurricane Bob. You can see the visible satellite picture here behind me. We'll turn to it and show you what's going on. Of course, we can see the eye of Bob this morning with the first satellite pictures. Due to the upper level winds, the eye becoming a little bit better, or actually a little bit worse, a lot harder to see is what I'm trying to say here, obviously. And down to the south, of course, we can see some clearing skies occurring over southern New Jersey. But again, Bob continues to remain a very, very strong hurricane. Winds are 115 miles an hour, and it is moving to the north at 30 to 35 miles an hour. And we also have to talk about the fact that it's coming into the land within the next 1 to 2 hours. So this thing is really cruising on to the north. You can see the very, very heavy rain associated with this thing. New York City, New Haven, Groton, Hartford, Providence, a line of thunderstorms have just moved through. There's a line of thunderstorms out in the Hamptons right now toward Montauk Point, heading to Groton, Worcester County into Boston. Some breaks with the rain, but basically some heavy rain bands moving on through as we speak. So not only a rainmaker, but also the potential for a very, very damaging wind maker. And we're talking about the eastern side of the storm when we mention this. We've been talking to John Hope during the morning hours, and we've been seeing, again, the eastern side of the storm remaining the most potential for the severe weather. All right, let's say it comes east of Montauk Point and perhaps right over Providence. Anyone east of this area is in trouble. So we're talking about Boston, we're talking about Providence. We're going all the way down 95, and we're going east through Buzzards Bay, Narragansett Bay, and out to the Cape. Some folks preparing this morning. Let's take you to Falmouth, Massachusetts to see what they did. Yeah, they took the word of the wise and head out of town. A lot of boats in this area.
High tides, the storm will be beyond, and they'll have a northwesterly wind. So good afternoon to you, Liz.
Good afternoon. Busy day for you.
Extremely busy. And good afternoon, everybody. We do have the most severe weather affecting us during the next 4 hours, and we are concerned about the surge because not only does the lower pressure within the storm system, but also the strong winds pack the water in, especially through inlets such as Buzzards Bay. This should be on the order of 10 feet plus or minus a couple of feet above normal high tide. Again, normal high tide is not exactly coincident with this, but the low tide really hasn't gone out all that much. So there will be flooding, especially Pocasset and Wareham and all those areas. We are looking at the entire cloud circulation of Bob moving off to the north-northeast. You can see the eye in there. It's traveling off to the north-northeast at about 35 miles per hour. It's ripping. It should speed up even more so. And by 4 to 6 p.m., 4 p.m. down on the south coast, it'll be all over with except for a gusty northwesterly wind. These are the current coordinates of the storm as issued by the National Hurricane Center. However, it has moved in so fast, even further north of these coordinates. It's right up in the vicinity of Newport, Rhode Island, or just south of there at this time, continuing on this northeasterly track toward Boston. We have the clouds up into northern New England, then whipping around the backside with the clear skies, which will lift up from the south later on today. A little more unsettled weather will be coming our way during tomorrow. We're looking at the observations here showing the winds, and then we're going to be going back to the radar. First of all, the winds are out of the northwest at New York City. We're out of the northeast to east down through Block Island, generally in the 30 to 40 mile per hour range, but gusting to 55 miles per hour already in the vicinity of Newport. They're out of the southeast, will become more southerly out in here on Cape Cod in the next hour or two, as these winds really start to pour in with the really strong gusts. And we're looking at a high dew point, falling barometer, falling rapidly here in Boston. Our winds are out of the eastern quadrant now at roughly 30 miles per hour. Lesser winds up in Portland, very light atop Mount Washington, and around the Horn to the west. We have a tornado watch out. We have a flood warning out for much of Massachusetts and much of New England, indeed. And we also have the hurricane warning. Now we go to the radars and show you what's going on. As we lift this entire area of precipitation northward, you can see the eye, this inverted U right down in here, moving into the vicinity of Newport, Rhode Island, lifting the moisture northward and out of the range of the radars. Note all the heavy rain out here, folks, in Worcester County out through the Berkshires. Not only do we have the winds in Worcester County at the higher elevations in particular, but we also have the heavy rains from there westward through the Berkshires with flooding a distinct possibility. That's why the warnings are out. The rain will continue right on up here for the rest of the afternoon as well. Live from the Chatham National Weather Service radar, we are looking back at this situation. We are showing extremely heavy to severe thunderstorm activity running down through much of central and southern Rhode Island. Moderate to heavy rain flashing in much of our area. F is Framingham, W is Worcester, down through NB, New Bedford, and eastward out through Cape Cod. Lesser amounts of rain out there right now, but all this is feeding in as the whole thing starts to lift off in this northeasterly direction. Heavy rains moving up through Cape Ann and up through the New Hampshire seacoast at this time. And as you can see with that track, more of this heavy rain should be crossing the Boston metropolitan area in another hour or two and lasting for a couple hours beyond that. Back to the map and showing you what we're talking about for high winds. We're going to be seeing winds over 100 miles per hour from portions of experience right up to the Maine coast, also atop Mount Washington. Lesser winds still across much of Maine, much of northern New Hampshire, even more so in Vermont, and down to the south and west. Everything will be starting to wind down here off through portions of western Connecticut and New York City. The track of the storm should take it right up through Rhode Island, Narragansett Bay area, across the Boston area, the brunt of this system between noon and 4 p.m. This projected track has been holding very nicely here along and about 100 miles, 50 to 100 miles to the east of this track here is where the worst conditions will be experienced, and that's what you see drawn on the map here, lifting it northward. But as it does lift northward, we're going to be seeing the winds tending to die, slow somewhat. They're still going to have problems out on Cape Ann with a southeasterly flow becoming southerly, and even up along the Maine coast, a southeasterly flow becoming southerly. But by later on this afternoon, the whole thing moves on by and the winds shift into the northwest, and everything will then come to a screeching halt. There'll still be gusty winds out of the northwest with showers, but the high tide, which occurs in our area at about 7 p.m., plus or minus an hour, will be occurring when the winds are offshore. So the water will not be driven onshore, and therefore we're not extremely concerned about flooding in many of these areas because of that phenomenon. Now here, the high tides are later this afternoon, and even though it's not exactly coincident with the arrival of the storm, it's still a rising tide. It's still coming in and being pumped up. The surge is being pumped up by the strong winds and the low pressure within the storm, so we are concerned about this south coastal area. Our forecast for Boston and vicinity calls for the strong winds, the heavy rain, the muggy temperatures, the winds going to 70 to 100 miles per hour in about 2 to 3 hours here in Boston, and instrument flight rules to close conditions at Logan Airport, high tide later on. Again, that's fortunate for us. And for tonight, everything's wound down already. Showers, winds gusty out of the northwest, and for tomorrow, partly sunny, the temperature around the 80 mark, still a risk of some scattered showers, especially in the hills of New England, as we begin the big cleanup. This system has been compared to Hurricane Carol in 1954. It's a little weaker than that. However, it is a very strong storm on the low side of medium, and we haven't seen this in quite a while, and it's coming right up over us. In fact, at about 4 p.m., the eye could go right over Boston. The winds are very light, and then they'll start shifting into the northwest and increasing once again, but not as strong as they are until about 3 or 4 p.m.
So if we're caught in a situation where the eye of the storm is passing over, we shouldn't just think everything's over.
That's exactly correct, and what you should expect then is a rapid increase in the winds out of the northwest from the opposite direction, and I'll be watching for that to cause some windage problems on your home or trees or shrubs or what have you from the opposite direction. Another important factor here is that we're getting quite a bit of rain. Fortunately, it's been rather dry here this summer. If we had more rain, the ground would not have the holding ability on the roots of trees, and we'd have even more tree damage. Don't get me wrong, we're going to have a lot of tree damage, a lot of power outages. However, with the ground not being extremely soaked and just suddenly all this heavy rain, it's not going to be as bad as if it were if the trees were really in a lot of slop in the ground because of previous earlier heavy rains. So we're going to have the tree damage, but not as bad as it could have been.
And the flash flooding damage around, potential around this area, Boston?
Potential here for street flooding and also the minor river flooding. But out in the Worcester County, Berkshire area with the heavy rains coming down, be very wary of small streams which will rise extremely rapidly from the heavy downpours. And flash flooding is a very large problem that can affect people living in some narrow, constricted little valley kind of locations. And when those rains start pouring down to the mountains, it all has to drain off rapidly. And so that could be a problem.
Okay, Bruce, we will, of course, check back with you before this hour is over. The approach of the hurricane prompted many organizations to cancel normal business today. We have a list that includes school and college cancellations today.
Doesn't look like it's going to let anyone down the neck at all.
So earlier in the day, you'd mentioned that people were not taking the evacuation warning seriously, and from what you can see now, apparently they have, and most people have gone to higher ground.
It looks like they made their way off the island and are working their way off the neck.
Now, your house, which I have been to, I happen to know, is very close to the water. Are you worried right now about your house, or you still feel like you're in pretty good shape?
Well, we called the local lumber company, and they delivered some plywood. We nailed it up, and we're about ready to put the last piece on, which is where we're peeking through with the camera right now. And we're going to do that, and I think we're going to leave.
Well, I think
getting to that point.
That's a wise idea. So this local lumber company that was that you were able to get through to, are they must be doing a booming business today? I'm surprised you were even able to get through.
Delivering, no less.
Yeah.
The delivery truck had quite a lot of plywood on it, and but they took care of us.
Well, John, thank you very much. John Meffy, a Channel 6 employee, live at his home in Fairhaven, Massachusetts.
And we hope we won't be there for too much longer. He's going to head out and take shelter as people are being advised to do. As for the Cape and the islands, the Coast Guard earlier today moved its airplanes and helicopters from their base on Cape Cod to Westover Air Force Base in Chicopee. Meanwhile, boaters on the Cape worked through the night and early morning hours to get their boats out of the water. While many vacationers headed back from Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket, the boats going to the islands were full last night.
I could curl up, it'll rain, it'll blow, I'll curl up with my honey, and we'll have a lot of food, and we'll be fine.
The grocery stores on the Cape reportedly did a brisk business this morning, but say they have plenty of supplies still on hand.
Well, when a storm such as Hurricane Bob hits, people try to prepare as best they can, as many of you have probably been doing, no doubt, throughout the night and the day. Photographer Howard Lavitt was in South County this morning, and he shows us now how people pull together.
Forecast. Special regional information. The regional forecast.
And now it's time for the Michelin Drivers Report, brought to you by Michelin and your participating Michelin dealers.
Thanks to Hurricane Bob, we've got flood watches in effect from New Jersey all the way up into Maine.
and that is where the hurricane is moving. Now actually less than 85 miles to the south-southwest of Providence, Rhode Island. There'll be more rain back into western New York and Pennsylvania, too, with a stalled-out cold front, and some big thunderstorms, too, as well for Ohio.
Storm system is just south of us. You see it looping around. You can almost see a circulation with it. And note on the last indication right about here, we have a lot of reds and oranges. That's very, very heavy rain down towards the area of the eastern Long Island, extreme southern Rhode Island, and this is torrential rain with very, very strong winds at the same time. As far as the hurricane is concerned, we get to the other computer system, and we'll show you where it is as of about 15 minutes ago. It's now very close to Newport, Rhode Island. I've drawn X's there to indicate the expected track of the hurricane somewhere in the area of Buzzards Bay, into the New Bedford area, and then out east of Boston. Now, west of the storm track, we're talking about situations of winds of, about 50 to 80 miles per hour. And east of the situation where this hurricane is, we're talking about stronger winds than that. So here's the proposed track right in here, probably in the New Bedford area, the Plymouth area, and then out over the ocean east of Boston. Now, when we track the storm like this, it's east of the storm that gets the heaviest amount of winds, the strongest winds. We expect the winds over the Cape at peak time, which is going to be in the next couple of hours, of perhaps 75 to 100 miles per hour. Now, those winds will be from the southeast. Now, on the other side of the storm, it's going to be sort of a nor'easter kind of picture in the Boston area, the North Shore up through southern New Hampshire and southern Maine, with winds perhaps of 50 to 80 miles per hour. So there's your difference. Now, the rains could be heavier on this side of the storm. There's a flood warning for the counties, including the Boston area, out through central Massachusetts and western Massachusetts, and that heavy rain belt's going to be coming through, so there will be some stream flooding, some basement flooding, and so this is something really to be concerned about. Now, the hurricane warning includes all of the coastal sections of Massachusetts, all the way up the coast of Maine at the present time. There is a tornado watch out. However, this is a pretty normal thing that happens when a hurricane hits the coastline for the Weather Service to put out a tornado watch. So far, we've had no confirmed reports of tornadoes, and we may not get them. And if they do occur, they may be very small and rapidly dissipating storms. Now, as far as the situation is concerned as to when this storm will affect our area, it looks to me like you're talking it's going to be from where it is now to at 4 o'clock east of Boston. So you're talking between now and 4 o'clock from the area of Boston south, where we're going to get the brunt of this storm. Probably ending up in the Cape about 2 o'clock, and the brunt in the Boston area somewhere between 2:30, 3:30, 4 o'clock. After that, the storm gets north of us, and everything winds down quite rapidly. Now, if you're talking about tide situations and the potential of flooding tides, and we're talking about Narragansett Bay and Buzzards Bay, their high tide is 4:30 this afternoon. The storm's going to be passing them between 1 and 1:30, so that's about 3 hours before the intense high tide. So there will be a high tide that's higher than normal, but they're going to miss the real storm surge because that occurs when the hurricane moves right to the west of them at the exact time of high tide. And the high tide in the Boston area and points north, the North Shore of Massachusetts, the Portsmouth, New Hampshire area, the York, Kittery, Kennebunk, Ogunquit area of Maine is at about 7:30. Now, they may have some high tides there because the storm will be in there in the vicinity about 5 or 6 o'clock. So that's what we're talking about at the present time, talking about a storm that will be moving up. The brunt of the storm will be in the Cape area, the Buzzards Bay area, to the north and east, to the north and west of the storm. We're talking about the potential for heavy rains, winds of hurricane force. There's going to be some power outages, but the worst, once again, will be over the Cape and the islands, and the worst for all of us here in Massachusetts should be over by 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock this afternoon. That's it for now, Chet and Nat.
We're going to be going down to Fall River and Amalia Beretta in just a minute, but I wanted to ask you a question, if you could maybe make your way back to the anchor desk here. We always hear that when hurricanes hit land, they lose some of their punch. Is that likely to happen with Bob? And to what extent do you think that could happen as Dickie trots over to the anchor desk here?
He does his jog.
There's a little bit of a jog to get back to the anchor desk. So, yes, I didn't get a chance to show you the satellite picture. And the satellite picture I don't know if we have, but the satellite picture from earlier today actually showed the eye of the storm. You could clearly see it. This will probably start to move in a few moments, but what we'll see is a clearly defined dark area in the middle. And when you see that, you'll see it shrinking and filling. That may be an indication that the storm is weakening. Watch this as it gets into the colder water. If you look at this very closely, you see that belly button shaped area. Well, it sort of shrinks in the last hour. And our waters are obviously colder than the waters off of the North Carolina and Virginia coast. So the maximum winds right now from the Hurricane Center, they say 115 to 120 miles per hour. I'm cutting that down a little bit on the Cape to 75 to 100 for just that reason.
Well, that little bit helps.
That little bit may help a little
indeed.
bit. So we'll watch that closely. We're going to really watch the Cape area in the next hour or two, because there's a major difference between the damage that a 75 mile per hour wind does as opposed to, let's say, 100 or 110. There's a major, major damage.
And there are some obviously things that those of you who are veterans here in New England know that you need to do just before a hurricane. And if you're new to this area, you know, just secure what is outside that may be loose. If you have loose lawn chairs, the danger is they could come flying through a window. So make sure they're secure, empty garbage cans, that sort of thing. And as Dick has suggested, we are likely to have power outages in some areas here. So you ought to get some flashlights and batteries and so forth together, so you won't be groping for that should it become very dark.
Yeah, on the power outage, excuse me, Chuck.
No, I was going to say, if there is a power outage, our coverage is being simulcast to WBUR-FM at 90.9 on the FM dial. So if you lose power and have a portable radio, you can continue to listen to Channel 5 updates in WBUR-FM. We're also being simulcast on Channel 44.
There will undoubtedly be some power outages. And another thing I just want to point out, when Emily came across this area, we hardly had any rain. And that makes a big difference as far as the potential power outages, because if there's no water on the leaves and the trees, and there's no wind driving against the tree, I mean, no rain driving against the tree, that's an awful lot of weight that you've released. In this situation, even with a 60 mile per hour gust, maybe 65, there could be several trees down. So the winds don't have to be 100 miles per hour in the Boston area to have several areas with power outages. And we had several days, I keep having to comparing this to Gloria, but we had several days, 2 or 3 or 4 days, where some people lost their power.
5. Some tiles being lifted off it's an abandoned building, the Masonic building next to the Veterans Center, but just to give you an idea of how strong the winds are, they're starting to pick up now, and actually I'm seeing quite a bit of traffic on 95. I imagine maybe in a half an hour or so that might let up.
Light. Everything else is just a light. Well, needless to say, the winds are strong.
For no other reason, apparently just to station themselves there and to tell people probably to get off the roads. Now, the train station, the trains have been coming in. I'm trying to find out from the governor's staff if the trains are also supposed to stop operating as the situation is with the roads and the airports being closed as well. But trains have just been coming in and coming out. But of course, even if you were going to catch a train, you're not supposed to be on the road to even get to the train station. So again, stay put, but we'll keep an eye out here. Really great look at downtown Providence on a very unusual Monday. We see some lights in the American Express building. It's hard to see if there are people inside. As you know, the governor wanted all employees, both.
The wind and the sea is coming in upon you, so that is the biggest danger there. And again, we'll just stay on top of this as best as we can. Back to you guys.
We've been talking about how important it is to get to shelter if you possibly can.
Are really going, so it is expected to hit hard in this area. Behind us, I don't know if you can see, but the river behind us has been forming some white caps recently, because the storm is really revving up here and has been for the last 45 minutes or an hour or so. There are occasional tremendous gusts of winds that come up, and then suddenly it starts to rain very hard, and then it'll stop, and then it'll come back up again. The Braga Bridge here in Fall River has also been closed. There are a number of mandatory evacuations that have taken place along coastal communities, such as Westport and Mattapoisett. They are low-lying communities, and of course they are in extreme danger of flooding, so people have been told to get in their cars and get out of the way. So that's about it from here, Natalie.
Thanks, Amalia.
All right, Amalia, one other note. I mentioned earlier that there will be no tolls for motorists getting out of town on the Mass Pike and through the tunnels. Massport is also asking people Obviously, if you have to use the Tobin Bridge, you have to use the Tobin Bridge, but don't just go out looking around. It can be very dangerous on the Tobin Bridge when the winds get to be about 60 or 70 miles an hour or higher. So keep that in mind, those of you who are planning.
That sounds crazy, doesn't it?
Declared in the state and in the city of Boston earlier this morning. Mayor Ray Flynn asked most businesses to please let their employees go, and we know
wind speeds here. We've had some reports. Taunton reporting wind gusts over 40. Now the airport in Warwick is reporting wind gusts up to 40 miles an hour. Here at the station, our anemometer is showing wind gusts over 30. We heard Sean Daly saying the wind was blowing really hard in westerly. That's probably over tropical storm force. We have tropical storm force winds on westerly and likely hurricane force winds now in Block Island. We've lost our reports from Block Island as the storm center is now very close to the island. We can see this is the latest satellite picture from about 12:30. I'll try and show you, we don't have a loop on this one, but you can pretty much see the counterclockwise circulation embedded and printed in the clouds there, with the eye of the hurricane just a little bit further down to the south of Block Island. Still watching it track. It's right in this area right here and continues to move off towards the north. It looks like it's going to strike somewhere around Narragansett, come on shore within the next hour, around 2 o'clock. We have the winds blowing from this direction, south-southeast on the Cape and the islands, and we have the easterly winds here in Rhode Island, northern Rhode Island, with the more of a northeasterly wind out towards the eastern portions of Long Island as the storm system is going to continue to move in this fashion. Notice down here, it looks like we have some sun shining now in southern New Jersey, so where there was a hurricane warning this morning in southern New Jersey, it's all gone by there. Now they're having a gusty but partly sunny afternoon. We have the latest coordinates for you as well if you're plotting along with us on your Channel 6 hurricane tracking chart. At 1 o'clock, the National Hurricane Center in Miami reports 41 north and 71.7 west. So we have this storm system closing in right here in Rhode Island. Again, no reports of severe winds. I just had handed to me the latest hourly observation so I can take a look right with you as to what's going on. New Bedford now reporting wind gusts to 60 miles an hour. We have also wind gusts in Boston over 40 miles an hour with a heavy thunderstorm in progress in Boston. Providence now reporting wind gusts to 43. That's at the National Weather Service at T.F. Green Airport. Hyannis out on Cape Cod, wind gusts up to 50 miles an hour. That's tropical storm force. And it looks like the islands have all been shut off. We don't have any observations from Block Island. We don't have any from Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket. That's unfortunate. That's probably where the heart of the worst of the storm is occurring at this time. Hartford, Connecticut, further away from the storm, still getting wind gusts over 40 miles an hour. We have lots of TR pluses. That means heavy thunderstorms. That's why we do have a flash flood warning in effect. That means the flash flooding is happening now in Rhode Island. Let's take a look at Doppler weather radar and see exactly how those rains have developed. If you've been watching us for the last hour or so, we were cautious about a possible little hook or maybe a tornado embedded with the showers and thunderstorms. Well, it doesn't look like there's a hook anymore, but if you follow that path, the yellow line there, that is a arc of thunderstorms centered around the storm that continues to pretty much just hold its ground the last couple of hours. You can see it right here, and this is all moving off to the north slowly. This is a big storm right here across, just looks like the westerly New London area of southern Rhode Island, southern Connecticut. And it looks like Block Island is dry right now. The Cape Island is dry right now. I believe Block Island is dry because it's so close to the center of the hurricane. So if you can listen to us on the radio down in Block Island, your winds are probably going to shift after a bit of a lull here. You'll be shifting into a strong westerly wind. Meanwhile, on the Cape and Islands, not too much rainfall, but the wind certainly is a problem with the coastal erosion occurring right now from southern Connecticut, the eastern portion of Long Island, right across westerly Charlestown right now under the gun with the waves crashing ashore. Same with Aquidneck Island. Fortunately, the people have been evacuated, so it should be safe as far as the people goes. Now we're watching out for property damage as the tidal surge, that is the sort of the bulge of water that comes in the center of the hurricane, is expected to be 5 to 15 feet, with the tendency for the 15 feet to be on the eastern side of the center of the storm. And as I said, that center of the storm looks like it's going to cross right over Block Island, head right up towards Charlestown with a beeline towards Providence. That'll put the worst of the storm, again, from the Aquidneck Island area towards Martha's Vineyard and the Elizabeth Islands. So we continue to watch it as it bears down. It looks like the next 2-3 hours is when all the damage is going to be done.
So just to clarify, Tim, and Dave Lehman has joined us in the studios, if we've been mentioning all morning long and all afternoon long that the worst of the storm might hit about 2. Are we beginning to see the worst of the storm? Do you anticipate the worst in, well, you've said the next few hours, so we still can't pinpoint it.
Well, we do have the storm bearing right down on Block Island right now. The storm is practically on the shores of Block Island, and it's all going to gradually move north. So it's really going to happen in the next hour or so in the southern half of the state, and then more from 2 to 3 o'clock in the northern half of the state. And this is from NHC, the National Hurricane Center in Miami. Hurricane force gusts will reach southern New England coast within the next hour. This is as of 1 o'clock, 1:15. Fall River, Massachusetts, and Westerly, Rhode Island reported a gust of 61 miles an hour. That's a little less than hurricane force, with a hurricane force being at 75. But the prognosis is still for that hurricane force wind to sweep across from south to north in Rhode Island and southern Mass and Connecticut. Yeah, within the next 2 hours.
So the next hour could be the worst. Thank you very much, Tim Kelly, and we'll, of course, be checking back in with our meteorologists throughout the day.
One of our staff people just came in from Cranston and said that he saw 2 cars on Interstate 95, and yet, as he was passing an area in Cranston, he saw a couple people out driving golf balls. So you figure it out. Not a good idea, as we've already told you many times over this morning.
No, but as we've also mentioned many times, people just seem to do that. It brings out the folks seeking some thrills. We do have all the information for you regarding shelters where you can go to, and as Tim Kelly mentioned, the next hour may be the worst, so maybe we better pass that along to you right away if you want to try to go to a shelter very soon. These are throughout the state of Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and we have some of it on the screen for you. In South Kingstown, you can go to the URI Keeney Gym, in Westerly, Westerly High School, and in Charlestown, Charlestown Elementary.
And in Warwick, Tollgate High School, Pilgrim High School, and Warwick Vets High School. And in Cranston, a shelter there is the Cranston Senior Center.
Also in Newport, you can go to Rogers High School, Thompson Junior High, Sheffield School, Sullivan School, and Underwood School.
And in Portsmouth, Portsmouth High School, North Kingstown, Davisville Middle School, and Wickford Middle School.
In Swansea, Joseph Chase High School, and in New Bedford, the Hayden McFadden area, and the New Bedford High School Girls Gym as well.
Fairhaven, Wood School, Hastings Middle School.
By order of the mayor, Buddy Cianci.
So that actually brings you up to date, I think, for the moment in terms of a lot of the hardcore information, but this is really when it gets to be very serious. I had mentioned before, I'd gotten a call from a friend of mine, Jim Gallipo, from Middletown. He told me there that there were some sporadic power outages. He was able to get to me because he has a cellular phone. And the police there said that they don't know how many people were without power. They have been without power for probably the past hour to an hour and a half. In some cases, it may have already come back on. But I guess one of the reassuring things that people may have heard from the governor's noontime news conference was that they have 42 utility crews that were standing by and ready to go. 22 tree crews. You weren't here for Gloria, John, but I'll tell you, those tree crews...
No, I was in Florida, and I remember it.
Yeah, you remember it. It was quite a deal, and the trees became one of the major problems. 80% of the state, as you'll recall, were without power, and some of those folks were without power for 9 days. So
right now, as I understand it, in Fall River, much of that city is without power. We mentioned that to you earlier, and I guess we've got some more information on everything that's going on in Massachusetts from Paul Moniz, live in New Bedford right now. Paul?
Well, John, that's right. The power in New Bedford is certainly out. I think we have some feedback here. We're just going to turn down the monitor that we're listening to here in the studio. About 6,000 people are without power from Fall River all the way out into Acushnet and Fairhaven, and the down lines, of course, affecting just about everyone in some of the low-lying areas as well. Now, Com Electric is advising...
System will operate until system will shut down. Any trains that are in service at that
schools, at community centers, all throughout the area, bring a blanket, some food, and water, because that's something that certainly you want to make certain that your time there can be as comfortable as possible. I want to bring in my colleague, Gary Armstrong, who's been here much longer than I have, to ask Gary, what is it like for you right now? I just got here, and when I arrived,
because dishes start to shake and you lose your point-to-point contact, and ultimately it means we don't squeeze into that little 21-inch set of yours at home. So essentially what we've heard is that the state is pretty well braced for this. We've had some warning on it, as we mentioned earlier. I think Steve Cascione and our weather team had been talking about this since last Thursday and Friday, and one of the things that struck me about this, John, was that the weather people really seemed to be fairly certain this time around the path, and that it wasn't going to veer much. And the way Tim Kelly was describing it today, this other hurricanes had
the destruction left behind by Hurricane Bob.
From the air, what you get is literally a bird's eye view of the damage brought by Hurricane Bob. The major casualty we found, boats battered up against the shoreline.
The boats lining this New Bedford street only look like toys, but they are full-sized vessels tossed about like playthings by the big storm with the little name. The timber in this dock is the real thing, too, easily snapped into pieces resembling twigs by towering waves. Like seawalls throughout southern New England, this one in Little Compton provided little protection.
I don't think I would have wanted this, man.
Although you can't see it now, plywood once covered the windows here on Narragansett's Coast Guard House restaurant, but now the plywood is gone, so are the windows, and so are the walls. Just up the shoreline, a look at Narragansett Town Beach, whose beauty has prompted recent fights over beach access rights. Bob was determined to come here yesterday, and he left behind his destructive imprint. Block Island was one of the first places in our area to be bullied by Bob. The small island held its own. No major damage here, just boats beaten up and some buildings battered. The lighthouse at Point Judith is used to surviving storms and helping others make their ways through them. Today provided a picturesque backdrop for surfers enjoying the swollen waves left behind by a punishing storm. Logan Crawford, Channel 12 Eyewitness News.
Even the airport where Logan's trip began wasn't spared from Bob's wrath. The wind whipped through Newport State Airport, flipping over a plane. If you have electricity tonight, consider yourself lucky. There are still massive power outages throughout the region, affecting many of your neighbors and relatives.
Was exposed all the way to Perth.
This was a familiar scene almost everywhere. Workers stringing together new lines trying to restore power. The president of Narragansett Electric told us this is the worst damage he's seen in 20 years. Here's a list of the haves and have-nots. About 150,000 people in Rhode Island still don't have electricity. This includes 113,000 customers of Narragansett Electric and 7,100 customers with Blackstone Electric. Massachusetts also took a beating. 500,000 customers don't have electricity tonight. The companies urge you to be patient and please avoid live wires. We know it's hard to be patient when you're
Several days before he determines and other officials determine if, in fact, Massachusetts is eligible for that federal aid. Meantime, Cal Electric says it's working hard to restore power. They say that they're putting people back online at a rate of about 1,000 homes an hour, but they admit that in some areas it may be several days before electricity is restored.
Devastating picture there, Paul. Thank you very much.
And Cape Cod was also slammed hard by Hurricane Bob, where hundreds of boats are washed ashore. Many homes are damaged, some are just gone. ComEd estimates more than 200,000 customers in the Cape and Islands are without power tonight. And tens of thousands of people are still without power tonight, but the situation is slowly improving. Narragansett Electric says 100,000 customers remain without electricity. That's a third of those who were without juice after the storm. Newport Electric has some 18,000 customers still in the dark. And Blackstone Valley reports power restored to all but about 7,000 homes. Included in the downed power lines are a set hanging over 195 in East Providence. Hurricane Bob broke the poles, holding them high above the highway. But the lines are above the traffic, and Narragansett Electric says they pose no danger to motorists. The crews are still working on them as we speak. And this is the scene live tonight in Tiverton, where a big tree has fallen across power lines. Sean Daly joins us tonight from Tiverton. And Sean, how are the repairs going?
Pam, I have to say slowly. Remember, we get our power here through a relatively antiquated system of cables and poles, not the high-tech systems we're so used to in this society. So when Mother Nature messes with those cables and poles, as she obviously has here in Tiverton, there's no magic button, unfortunately, to fix everything. It's really just a lot of long, hard, and slow work, and that produces frustration.
Right now, I've got some formula, some bottles, some orange juice. This is corn, and 5 pounds of chicken wings.
5 pounds of chicken wings?
Yeah, well, we're having a christening on Sunday, and that's in anticipation of the christening, so I need my stove to cook it, but I don't have the electricity. So.
Nice timing.
Yeah, well, I know it couldn't have happened at a worse time, really.
Of course, in 1991, when is a good time to lose power? Work crews spent the day scrambling to fix the damage as quickly as possible, but the repairs take time.
It's not flipping a switch. It's not a quick fix. It requires hours of hard work, and that's
worst case scenario. How long? Week, 10 days?
It could take that length of time, and I think we're going to do our darndest to get restoration as soon as possible.
Repair crews from up and down the East Coast are coming to help. They're starting with the lines that serve the most people and working their way down to lines that serve fewer homes. Most people should get their power back within a few days, but people in more isolated areas will wait longer. Helga Lease is one of the lucky ones. She got power this afternoon. You seem relieved.
Very, very. Now I don't have to worry about the food in the refrigerator and the freezer anymore, and I can cook my chicken wings, and I can have my 30 to 40 people over on Sunday and not have to worry about anything. So.
There is a God.
Yes, there is, definitely.
It's fun. That's the best part of it, when someone's smiling. You know, the kids are jumping up and down.
But they're not all smiling today.
Not at all.
You're catching grief?
A lot. You know.
Talk to me.
Not many people have gone by and thrown me the bird yet, but that does happen.
Didn't me? We should point out that the electric company promises that they don't play favorites when it comes to deciding which communities get attention first. They say all communities are getting attention immediately, and that the same rule of thumb applies everywhere. That is, the big lines get fixed first, and the smaller lines after that.
All right, Sean, we should probably point out in all fairness, one reason they don't want to commit themselves to a timetable is they got in trouble 5 years ago when they did that, right?
Yes, they did, and they say things are better now, a few improvements, but still very slow.
All right.
Keep those gestures to yourself. And lots more still ahead.
Sure, lots more tonight as our coverage continues of Hurricane Bob the day after.
And we're going to check in Newport, where the big hang-up is phones. And throughout the newscast, we'll be showing you some of the dramatic scenes today from around southern New England. In Jamestown, Bob tossed boats on the beach like a careless child. One of them christened Patience. The owner is going to need it.
To get rid of her gray, my wife can spend 40 minutes. But I discovered the 5-minute hair coloring.
The revolutionary discovery called Just for Men, from the leader in men's hair coloring. Simply apply Just for Men, and in 5 minutes, shampoo out.
Gray is blended away. The look of my natural color is back in 5 minutes. That was me, and it won't fade or wash out.
My hair takes forever, but you look great in just 5 minutes.
The look of your natural color in just 5 minutes. With Just for Men.
If you have what it takes, East Coast Aerotech can train you for a secure, well-paying career in aircraft maintenance.
The instructors are good. They're very good. They explain themselves very, very well. They'll take extra time if you need it.
You'll get hands-on experience at one of the nation's leading aircraft maintenance schools.
I would say they were exceptional.
Call East Coast Aerotech at 1-800-292-ECAT for an appointment to tour our facility. 1-800-292-ECAT.
For a limited time, the answer is...
Yes, definitely yes.
Because it's Hyundai. Yes, Hyundai clearance time. With big rebates on every new XL in stock.
Can I use the rebate for my down payment? Yes, ma'am.
Take my trade-in, too?
Yes, sir. How about a bumper-to-bumper warranty? Oh, yes.
And a free VCR?
No way. What about the price? Who could say no to this?
XL is reliable, economical, and under $6,000. Take a test drive at your Hyundai dealer now.
It's Hyundai clearance time.
So is it a smart time to buy?
Yes.
The important message of this commercial is that no one offers you more fresh meat, fish, and vegetables that are great on the grill than Stop and Shop. The rest of this commercial is just pure sizzle.
Now, if you're affected by Hurricane Bob, as many of us are, and you have no electricity, no food, the Red Cross has opened 3 places where you can go to eat. They are Smithfield Housing Authority at 7 Church Street.
And Pawtucket Fire Station number 3 at 7 Columbus Avenue, and North Smithfield Police Station. That's located at 575 Smithfield Road. That one opens at 7 o'clock tonight. And if you're having trouble making telephone calls to some areas today, well, once again, you can thank Hurricane Bob. Main cables to Newport, Block Island, Jamestown, Fall River, the Cape, and South County have all been damaged. Crews right now are making those repairs. Power outages have also affected phones in the area, and New England Telephone is setting up emergency generators to try to resolve that. Well, Bob hit Newport beaches very hard. The waves are still angry out there today, where yesterday huge waves poured over the beach, shattering the seawall and carrying tons of sand onto Memorial Boulevard. Today, Department of Transportation bulldozers were out moving all that sand back. The waves also crushed several of the Easton Beach buildings. The crushed bathhouses are a new tourist attraction there.
And still ahead, important information about insurance coverage for hurricane damage and how Bob is hitting the economy.
But first, another view from the day after. In Bristol, the historic boathouse at Blythewold Mansion was just washed out, almost washed away, and some of the beauty of the Arboretum has also been uprooted.
Shop the G-Fox one-day sale Thursday, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. for the best savings of the season. Just in time for back to school, save 20 to 50% throughout the store. The G-Fox one-day sale Thursday.
Sometimes I feel like I'm being pulled in a dozen directions at once. Stress, poor diet, irregularity. Then I read about fiber therapy with new Metamucil wafers. They taste like cookies. So while the kids have their milk and cookies, I have my fiber.
New Metamucil fiber wafers. Just 2 little wafers have as much soluble fiber as this bowl full of apples. Extra fiber you may need to stay regular.
I still can't slow down, but at least now I can keep up.
New Metamucil fiber wafers. Fiber therapy for busy people.
I'm ready for a new car, but I'm waiting for the best deal.
It's Toyota clearance time, and you can make your best deal ever on a new 91 Toyota.
I'd love a new Toyota, but we don't have a lot to spend.
Don't worry, we've got 11 models priced under $10,000, and since the 92s are on the way, your deal could be even better. It's Toyota clearance time. But hurry, it's Toyota clearance time. Every Toyota's priced to sell now.
For real value, it's the best deal going.
For 5 years, I've operated this Firestone shop with one goal in mind, to keep the customers coming back. To help our customers save gas, we air their tires when we do a complete oil change. And yes, we sell Firestone and Bridgestone tires. We mount them free, fix your flats for free, and rotate them for free. And one more thing, we've never done anything for any customer without authorization. I'm John Alexander, and I want you to keep coming back.
John Alexander's Firestone, 521 North Street, New Bedford.
Well, trees are down all over the state. Who pays for the damage they've done?
A very good question, and also a very complicated one. Our team report continues tonight. As Barbara Marr tells us, it really depends upon the circumstances as well as your insurance policy.
Seeing your tree has landed on your truck is bad enough. Hearing you have to foot the bill is another thing.
I just called my insurance. See what they say.
What did they say?
Well, they said my truck's not covered.
Why not?
They said it's not on the homeowner's insurance.
Even though it was on your property?
Yeah, that's what they tell me.
Turns out Ken Barber needs comprehensive insurance on his truck to cover flying objects because homeowners' policies in Rhode Island generally won't pay for damage to vehicles. If that surprises you, listen to this situation.
One tree fell on my house and one tree fell on my neighbor's land.
Both trees were on Al Mastrostefano's property before the storm. Will his homeowner's policy pay for the damage and tree removal?
The tree falling on my neighbor's land will not be covered because it did not cause any property damage. The removal of the tree from my own home will be covered because it did cause property damage.
Experts say the key is the tree had to cause property damage. So who pays to remove the tree that falls on your neighbor's property and doesn't cause any damage? Your neighbor, unless he can prove you were negligent.
If you have a tree and you know that it isn't in a stable condition, or you know that it might fall over, then you might have some legal responsibility there. On the other hand, if the tree is very sturdy and very strong, and you could not have foreseen that a storm of this nature would come by and uproot it, then you probably are not responsible.
So before the next storm, check your insurance policy and check your trees. Barbara Marr, 6 News.
This is Tom Bryady. Perishable food is one of Hurricane Bob's casualties. They pulled it off shelves today at Ryan's Market in Wickford, throwing some out, storing the rest in a refrigerated truck, and thinking positive.
Yeah, we're not in bad shape at all right now. Only thing is we're not open for business. But
lots of places weren't open. Electric Boat canceled its first shift. So did Stanley Bostitch. Showcase Cinema planned to reopen after being forced to cancel its movies last night.
The lack of electrical power is affecting different businesses in different ways. That florist shop is closed. This sandwich shop over here is open. And that baseball card shop is open, but only operating on half power.
Some businesses thrived. Danny Perillo's glass shop got plenty of calls, but this seafood and deli shop lost $5,000 worth of lobster when the power went out. They cooked what they could, but need ice for the lockers.
You're at 50 degrees and we're trying to bring it down. That's why we're out getting ice right now, to salvage the product.
And what happens if you don't get ice?
Well, then the product is NG. No good.
Most people appear to be keeping Bob in perspective.
we've been here for over 100 years, and we have a lot of faithful customers, and I'm sure most of them will be back when we get open.
Still, it's hard to estimate how much business was lost. Lost by wind and water. Tom Bryady, 6 News, Wickford.
Both Electric Boat and Stanley Bostitch, by the way, had power restored in time for workers to report for their second shift this afternoon.
And Rhode Island Governor Bruce Sunland said today it may cost Rhode Island more to clean up from Hurricane Bob than for Hurricane Gloria back in 1985.
But federal disaster teams are making their own assessments.
Ann Doherty spent the day with the governor out touring the state.
In a National Guard helicopter from the State House lawn, Governor Sunland took off for a first-hand look at what Hurricane Bob had left behind. On the West Bay, the most striking damage was in Narragansett, where crews already had started working on the Coast Guard house. But for the most part, although many homes remained boarded up, they escaped damage. Westerly also looked undamaged from the air. On the ground, it was a different story. Several boats had been tossed on the rocks.
But you'll be able to get it out of here on a trailer?
This 42-foot boat broke free from its mooring.
Well, I wish you luck getting her back on the water again.
Well, I'd rather have this than a loss of life or something like that.
Up the road in Misquamicut, waves and sand washed across the road.
This is eroded. All the sand, the beach is eroded.
Back in the air, heading to Newport, several boats were pushed up on the rocks. But again, a closer look shows where the damage was evident. At First Beach, cabanas knocked over.
The roadway we're now standing on was completely blocked with sand this morning.
Beside that, police say 530 of Newport's 544 streets had some kind of damage, even near the mansions, even on Ocean Drive. For repairing these and other damages across the state, Governor Sunland is looking for federal help.
I would think so. I would expect that the damage will be equal to or greater than it was during Gloria, and Gloria was $20 million.
And that time, the federal government did help. Ann Doherty, 6 News, Newport.
By the way, federal officials told me minutes ago they hope to have a number on the damage estimate by tomorrow night at this time. When we come back in just a moment, just what you didn't want to hear. More rain. Steve will have the forecast tonight.
And here's another scene from the day after. In Providence, Bob brings pollution. The runoff from the hurricane could push as much as 50 million gallons of raw sewage into Narragansett Bay.
Come help celebrate the grand opening of our new Valueland Superstore in Warren, Rhode Island. Check out our new International Flower Shop, Party Shop, and Bake Shop, and find outstanding savings like these. Lipton Tea Bags 100 count $1.